So I was just reading the question, which was about the warmth of the water. So the best thing to do is to start with water, which is lukewarm. So you start when you're making the developer with 500 milliliters of warm water, and that means that the soda crystals dissolve much more quickly. The thing about the soda crystals is they decrease the temperature quite a bit, so you want to accommodate for that when you're making the developer. You don't want to make it too hot because it'll make your developer super fast if it's really, really hot. We have a question from Julie, which says, does it still work with decaf coffee? I would assume so. I haven't tried it, so that's something to look into. I assume that because most plant-based materials do work with plant-based developer, so the soda crystals and the vitamin C do quite a lot of work, and then the coffee element or the plant-based element adds more to the process, makes it stronger. Cecile said, hi Melanie, what's the best type of photographic paper to use? Glossy, matte, satin or pearl? All of those will have really interesting effects, and it just depends what kind of result you want at the end. I prefer a matte paper, but it's really up to personal preference. Brenda says, when you say top up, that means I add water until I get 1 litre of developer. Yes, that's correct. So I'll just go through that again. The steps are to make 500 milliliters of warm water, then add the soda crystals, which is 40 grams, then the 10 grams of vitamin C, then the coffee, and then when you come to topping up, you'll probably be at somewhere between 600 and 700 milliliters. You want to top that up to 1 litre in total. Rona says, the salt water mix hasn't completely dissolved. Is that a problem? I used hot water. It's probably reached its dissolving point, so it means that it's ready for being used as a fixer. Because you want to, the purpose of putting the salt in the water is you want to get it to the absolute highest saturation point. So it sounds like you've reached that point if it's not dissolving anymore. Julie said, is the temperature of the fixer and or developer relevant? The temperature of the fixer shouldn't make a difference. Warmth of developer makes the developer slower or faster. So this is why I'm suggesting a kind of lukewarm room temperature kind of temperature for your developer. Julie says, oh, read that one. Brenda Vega says, can you reuse the developer? Yes, you can reuse the developer quite a bit. With plant-based developers, I've used them up to 3 times and they've still worked really well, and they do seem to get better and more potent the more times that you use them. Julie says, can you reuse a fixer? Yes, you should be able to reuse a fixer. I think you're using salt water, so that might be less recyclable than a standard fixer. And my source of vitamin C is the pure vitamin C from Bodybuilding Warehouse, which is a kind of powder formation, but you can get you can still use the fizzy vitamin C tablets that you get from the supermarket. Bonnie said, my salt did not dissolve and I realized I used sea salt by accident. I mixed up another batch, 200 grams to 1 litre. Is that okay? What I would do is try and use as much salt until you reach saturation point. That ensures that it does stabilize your image as much as possible. Anna says, soda crystals are the same as soda ash. I'm not sure on that. It's bicarbonate of soda. Another question from Rona about how long does the developer last for? As long as you're keeping it in an airtight container, you should be able to keep it for a couple of weeks. As part of a sustainable darkroom residency, some of the artists kept their developer for 3 months and it still works really well. So I'm confident that you could keep it for quite a long time as long as it's in an airtight container. And by that, I mean something like this, which is like a glass recycled coffee container. Quite a few questions about citric acid instead of vitamin C. They are different things, so I would recommend getting vitamin C if possible. Citric acid is quite a bit different than the vitamin C. We've got a question about colour paper. Colour paper would work fine. Yes, you can use those in natural chemigrams and standard chemigrams. And Billy says, what does a vitamin do exactly when mixed with soda? It's something to do with the pH of the chemistry. And then when the phenol from the plants or the coffee is added, then it makes a quite potent mixture. That sounds quite vague, sorry. So yes, soda ash is sodium carbonate. Fantastic. So I'll just wait another minute or so for more questions, and then we'll go ahead and make the developer. So if you're if you want to get your materials ready for making the developer, you'll need soda crystals, you'll need vitamin C, and you'll need coffee, as well as 500 milliliters. So Julie says, when you say salt water stabilizes but doesn't fix, does that mean the image would fade over time? No, it shouldn't fade over time. It's just a different definition of kind of like a different definition. It means it's not as archival, I would say. Rona says, as it's mixed, can I put it in the tray now? Yes, you can. Carolina says, I have vitamin C in tabs, 1.5 works. Actually, I found when I've been measuring out the vitamin C tablets, they come out at around 2.5 for 10 grams. So 2.5 tablets. But you also might be able to work it out from the weight of the entire tube. Bonnie says, if you're using salt fixer, do you wait until after the 24 hours to rinse it with water? Yes, that's correct, Bonnie. Okay, so if you're ready, get your 500 milliliters of water and then add your soda crystals. And then you need to mix that until that has dissolved completely. So that's why we're starting with the warmer water, just because the soda crystals reduce the temperature of the mixture quite a lot. Rona says, can you paint honey onto the paper before adding anything else? Yes. In fact, I'll get to that stage in a second, but yes, that will stop light reaching the paper as well as the chemicals. So if you wanted to start doing that, you can do that now. But for everybody who hasn't made their developer yet, we'll stick to the developer. So just to repeat what step we're on, we're mixing 40 grams of soda crystals to 500 milliliters of hot water, and I'll give you about 5 minutes to do that. Then we'll go on to the next step, which is adding the vitamin C. And I will go off the video just while you do that. I've already made quite a bit of the developer for this workshop, so I will not be demonstrating that part, but I will be demonstrating the Chemogram process. So I'll just go off video while you guys are mixing up your soda crystals, and I'll also write the instruction in the chat. We have a question from Rona who says, how long can you have the paper out of the packet before it starts to react? And I put, it will start reacting straight away, but it won't overdevelop during the workshop. So unless you have it out in the daylight for a long, like the sunlight outside, it won't overdevelop. So the next step is to add 10 grams of vitamin C, which equates to about 2.5 tablets. And it should fizz up a little bit. So if you want to add that to your mixture now. And this should dissolve much faster than the soda crystals. And you shouldn't mix in the vitamin C until the soda crystals are completely developed. And I find out whether they've until they've dissolved. And I find out if they've dissolved by just looking at the bottom of the jug. So I'll give you maybe 2 minutes to do that. And if there's any more questions, feel free to ask them in the chat. And then we'll add the 17 grams of coffee. Also, if you're planning to do the chemigrams alongside me in the workshop, it might be a good time now to get your stencils or stickers or anything that might block the chemicals from reaching the paper. So if you can add your 10 grams of vitamin C now, and then add the 17 grams of coffee after that's dissolved. I'll give you 3 minutes to do that, and I'll go off video and put the instructions in the chat. Okay, so you should have your mixture mixed together. So just to recap one more time, 40 grams of soda crystals in 500 mils of hot water, 10 grams of vitamin C, then 17 grams of coffee, and instant coffee is best. And then you top up to 1 litre, which can be up to, that can be cold or hot water. So now I'm going to demonstrate the Chemogram process. So if you want to work alongside me, that would be good. So I have my photographic paper. I'm just going to angle my camera a bit more down so you can see. And then I'm going to get my stencil. I'm using this to selectively apply my developer to the photographic paper. So you could do the same with putting stickers directly onto the photographic paper. You could use masking tape to cover the piece of paper and then rip it off afterwards. You can really experiment with lots of different things. You can also now apply your resist, so anything like a wax kind of crayon or your jam or anything that you might find in your kitchen cupboards which is a little bit sticky. I'm not going to use those today. I'm just going to use my stencil to selectively paint on my developer. So I've got exactly the same developer as you, and I'm just going to paint that on, and it looks like it might not be working, but then it starts to work after the first 2 minutes. And you can also apply your fixer at this stage as well. Let me know if you can't really see, and I'll try and move my computer down. I'll also spotlight myself. There we go. You can also use things like a spray bottle. that works really well. So you put the developer or the fixer into the spray bottle and apply it that way. Now I'm going to put some of my fixer on. As I mentioned in the video, if you're using salt water, it won't have as much of an effect, just because the fixer works so much quicker than the salt fixer does. And I do take steps to stop my fix from being so toxic. One of those is to put copper. You might be able to see in the background, I have a stack of copper over there from building offcuts. I put them into my fixer and that removes some of the salt, the silver particles from the developer and the fixer as well. I also use my fixer until it is really expired and it stops working, which means that it's much less potent than it would be fresh. So what's happening here is the light is trying to get to the photographic paper at the same time that the developer and fix is working. So that means where the fixative has got to the paper first, those places will now remain white and they won't change. The places where the developer has got to first is going to go really, really dark. And the ideal thing to do, if you can, is to expose your chemogram to daylight as you're making it, because then you get much more pronounced effects. I'm actually working in quite a bright room, so there is quite a big effect happening anyway. So you can make as many of these as you like. I could leave this for up to an hour or more, just for the chemicals to really seep in and for the light to really affect the paper. But I can also use it straight away because it is quite an instantaneous process. So you can see now that my developer and my fixer have really started to work. I'm going to try and carefully lift this up to show you. But now I'm going to put it into the developer and fixer and alternate it every couple of seconds. And what that does is it means that the developer gets to the paper and starts to make areas of the paper dark. And then when you put it in the fixer, then you'll get areas of white on the paper. And then by repeating that process again and again, you start to have these kind of lines of light and dark, which almost make the image look three-dimensional because of that those contrasts, which I'll try to explain a little bit more about later. So what I'm going to do now is put it in the developer and fixer and angle my camera at my trays with my phone as well. It's probably a good idea. So if you have sensitive skin, then you should use gloves. And also it's useful if you have tongs, which I do, so you don't have to touch the water. So I'm just going to put half in like this for now, just so you can see the difference. And it's going to go a nice orangey colour. Then I'm going to put the same thing in the other side. You can't see that. So you can keep doing that. I would say the limit is about 2 minutes, just because the fixer that I'm using is fixes after 2 minutes. But you could try working with a much less concentrated fix solution, so it reacts less quickly. So I'll put this one to wash. Actually, that's not right. I'll put it into fix for 2 minutes, so it's fixed completely, and then I will wash it. So I'll just answer a few more questions and then we can make another one. Pedro says, the 2 seconds still apply with salt and water. No, it would be much slower in the salt and water. Bonnie says, my print is almost completely dark. No white areas were preserved. So Bonnie, did you use any resists or anything like that? Just the turmeric. So what I would suggest, Bonnie, is to just apply the developer on selected areas of the print, and then not to dunk the whole thing in like I did. And then after you've painted on your developer, then put it in the fixative or the salt water for up to 24 hours. Anna says, can you use freshly made coffee? And how much would you need? Do you mean coffee that you've just made to drink? Oh yeah, Bonnie, if you can show us, that would be great. I can stop my spotlight, and if you want to turn your video on, that would be good. Oh, I'm going to ask to unmute you, and I'm also going to spotlight you. Oh, right. That's beautiful.
It's all dark, though.
So you haven't dipped that all into the developer? Did you dip the whole thing in, or
yeah,
is it?
I did first half, and then put it in the fixer, and then went back and forth.
Okay, yeah, what I would suggest, because you're using the salt water, is just to paint on the developer, and then where you want it to be, if you want quite a bit of a contrast, and then not to dip it in the developer at all.
Until after the fixer?
Yes, so you'd have to wait the full 24 hours.
Oh, okay.
So it would be quite a slow process. But if you wanted to have quite a contrasty image, you could paint on your developer and then just put it in the fixer, if that makes sense.
I'll keep trying.
It looks beautiful though. I really like that one. Can we see it again? Thank you, that's beautiful. What's the circle from? Is that from a stencil?
Yeah, I just used.
Ah, awesome.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Fanny. Does anybody else have any results to show? Just say in the chat and then I can spotlight you. Okay, well, while we're waiting, I'll make another one, and we can make chemograms together. Also, I'm not sure if any of you are knowledgeable about the Lumen printing process, but can you see, I've just had my stencil on the photographic paper and it's gone, it's made an imprint. So you can do that with daylight, or you can do it with standard light, like the ones that are in my studio. And you can use anything like a plant, a stencil, anything that blocks the light, and you can leave it in the daylight or kind of ambient light for a couple of hours. And then what you'll get is the perfect kind of imprint, especially if you put a piece of glass on top. And then if you put it in the fixer or the salt water for 24 hours, that image will stay. So it's a way of making photographic prints without having a darkroom, which I think is really cool. And that's called Lumen Printing. So just as an aside, that is one of the reasons why the Chemogram process works, because the really strong amount of light that it's getting, that the paper is not designed for, is that it's being, it's receiving much more light than it's designed for. So it means that you can make an image without focus light, but with a strong amount of daylight or ambient light. So feel free to write in the chat if you want to show any of your chemograms in process. And also if you have any more questions, particularly about the Lumen printing process, which I just talked about. And also another thing to note is if you don't use coffee and you use a different plant, say something like mint tea, you'll have completely different results. Instead of using coffee, you can use red wine. And of course, that will make your prints more reddy than brown. So really think about what might be in your garden or in the local park that you might be able to use. I'm going to use a little bit of turmeric. Try not to get too much on there. Okay, I'm going to leave that in the light for a little while, and I will ask Rona to share her screen. So I'll just remove my spotlight and I'll try and find Rona. Oh, there you go. So I'll ask you to unmute and I'll spotlight you.
Okay, so this is, don't know how much you can see there.
Oh yeah, we can see.
So there are figures. I just painted the developer on and then just put it straight in the salt fix. And then this one went much faster. Maybe it's different paper, I'm not sure, but that one went really quickly.
Yeah, cool.
I just put some stones on top of the paper and painted round them. So anyway.
Cool.
But yeah, because I'm working with the salt, I didn't kind of, you know, I just went straight into that to stabilize it, because I've kind of, in a way, just got black and white, as it were. So anyway, thanks.
Thank you, Rona. That's great. So Brenda Vega says, what are the measurements for red wine or mint tea? So the vitamin C and the soda crystals are the same. And in my experiment, I used 6 mint tea bags and I brewed them for overnight so that they were really brewed by the time I used them in my developer. And with the red wine, it's already quite strong. So I used 150 milliliters for a film. So I would say it would be more like 300 to 400 milliliters. Yeah. And you would use that as your starting body of water. Sheila says, can you combine Lumen prints with the Chemigram process, or would the Lumen image disappear? Just thought maybe using a resist on the Lumen before doing the Chemigram process. So yes, you could, but you'd probably need to do the Chemogram around the edges of the image, if that makes sense. So you'd put something on top of your photographic paper and then allow the light to reach it for quite a while. And then you would paint the developer kind of around the edges, or maybe adding kind of painterly effects. And then that would be another one where you would paint on the developer and not put it in the fix until you're ready to fix it, if that makes sense. Does anybody have any more questions or wanting to show their work? It's really cool to be able to see your prints. Yeah, Bonnie says, can I float multiple sheets of paper in the fixer at the same time? Yes, you can. That's perfectly fine. The only thing to be aware of is when you take out the photographic paper from the water and they start to dry, they might start to stick together. So that's something to bear in mind at the end of the process, and try and dry them separately so they're not touching. Okay, I'm gonna, Pedro says, you can also mention it as a resist in the email. How does that work, given it can be also used to make a developer? Oh, I think I might have been mistaken in saying red wine is a resist. It's more things like that are sticky, like a jam or a honey, that would be a good resist. Other things like wax make good resists as well. And I kind of liken it to printmaking, where you also have a resist, or kind of ceramics where you also have a resist. Oh yes, Steph, it would be great to show yours. I'll ask you to unmute and I'll spotlight your video. Oh, I spotlighted me as well.
This.
Oh wow, cool.
Nice.
And are you using coffee there?
That's coffee.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I didn't put this into the developer for very long at all after I'd applied. So I used some turmeric, and then not very long in the developer and straight into the fixer. When I put the first one in I got the similar result in the first one, but then I put it back in the developer, and then I got this. So this is sort of more.
It looks very pretty, like lots of different colours in there. I can see like purples, reds, oranges.
Yeah.
It's really beautiful. And then on the edge, you've got kind of like a white section.
Yeah, that's where I use some masking tape, I think, or yeah. It's really good. Thank you.
Yeah, Pedro says super cool, the oranges. Julie says she can show hers, so I'll just spotlight Julie and ask to unmute.
Hi.
Hi.
So one of these, so I'm using coffee and then salt water.
Yeah.
And one went in the developer first and the other went in the fixer first. And one is much lighter than the other, but they're both really subtle.
They're beautiful. They almost look like marble or something.
And then I had strips of masking tape going across and a mixture of turmeric, caster sugar and icing sugar.
Wow, cool. And are you using coffee as your developer as well?
Yeah, coffee and salt water.
Great. They're beautiful.
Yeah, very subtle actually, but you know, that's the first one. I guess you can play to get certain areas darker and other, you know, to get more contrast if you wanted them. But I think the subtlety is really exciting for me.
Yeah, me too. And I think if you left them out in the light for much longer as well, that would increase the contrast a lot more.
I shall play.
Awesome. Thank you very much for showing us. Sheila says she really likes the subtle effect as well. Okay, so I'm going to angle down just to finish this last chemogram. I think I need to add my spotlight again. You see it's even over just a couple of minutes, it's gone much darker, and I've also got my turmeric in there as well. I'm just going to actually paint that in a little bit more. And I'm also going to just put this in the fixer now. So it's going to go straight from here into the fixer. I'm going to leave that there for 2 minutes. So, does anybody have any more questions, and does anybody want to share any more of their work? Also, if you want to, you can also, if you think of questions afterwards, you can also email me on the Eventbrite email that you had before. Ah, that's a good question. Mylena says, what would happen if you use direct positive paper? So I've not used direct positive paper before, but it's likely that it would just be completely reversed. So where you paint on the developer, that would be white and the fixer would be black. But I haven't experimented with that yet. So that's something that would be really, really cool to try. Oh, Bonnie says the fixer is okay to keep even though there's honey and jam in it. Yeah, that's a good point actually. You probably wouldn't want to keep it for too long if it's got honey and jam in it. What I would suggest is try keeping it in an airtight container. Pedro says, when do you wash away the honey and the turmeric, etc.? So in the video, I did mention that at some point in the workshop, I was removing the turmeric while it was in the fixer with the paintbrush. And what that enabled me to do was to control when the fixer or the developer got to the paper. So that's a really important point. Thank you for bringing that up. So you can choose when to remove that. Say if you had your resist, like your honey or your jam, on the paper and you removed it while it was in the caffenol, then as soon as you remove that honey or the jam in the caffenol, that area is going to go dark straight away. However, if you decided to remove it remove the honey and the jam while it was in the fixer, that area will go white. So you can really control how the developer and fixer gets to the paper by using those resists. I hope that makes sense. It does sound quite complicated. Looks like HP has some very interesting work. Can we see them in the spotlight, please? HP, is that okay with you? Oh, wow, cool. I'm going to add a spotlight. That's really cool. Can you say something about that? I might have to ask you to unmute.
Hello. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Ah, it was, I used some candle. I used a bit of candle first of all on this one to give just a sort of line underneath it all, which is a bit difficult to see, I think, because there's a lot of reflection in
oh yeah,
the camera. And then I used stencils. We've got some stencil letters up for this one, and we just used a few bits and pieces around the house for that one. And then I also used a torch to expose again, you know, to re-expose.
yeah.
It's a very powerful, and I had control over that. So I could, so you know, things like we achieved that one by putting it was just a lid from a jar, and then I held the torch close to it to get it dark in the middle. So yeah, just and then mucked about with the developer and the. I'm using salt water, so it's not the contrast isn't that great, but
it looks great from here. It looks really great. Yeah, looks like the contrast has worked really well.
Yeah, I'm really pleased. I've done chemigrams before, and I've done chemigrams before, but not with this. I love this stuff, doing it with the natural materials. Yeah, it's great. I'll put them back in the salt water so they don't keep developing.
Oh yeah, great idea.
I don't know why my name is HP. It's Dino.
Oh yes, awesome. And are you using coffee as well, Ben?
Yeah, coffee. Exactly your recipe. Yeah. Oh, we did put a bit of honey on as well.
Great. Awesome.
Yeah. No, it worked really well.
Fun.
Thanks.
Rachel says she loves those prints. Does anybody have any more work to show? It's really cool to see all of your different results. Alabama says, just going back to the Lumen prints, how do you know when they are fully exposed? I know it's hard to give exact times due to difference in light conditions. Also loving everyone's work. Oh, that's nice. So going back to the Lumen prints, the best thing to do, I know it sounds vague, is to leave it in as much light as possible for as long as possible. So what I mean by that is if it's a cloudy day, it's probably going to take a couple of hours. You've got direct sunlight, you'll get a result really fast, and you can that can be done in about half an hour. So it's really about just making sure that the paper has got quite an intense amount of light. And I just wanted to explain a bit about that again, because I was making something while I was explaining it before. So the Lumen printing process works because photographic paper is meant to be used in the darkroom. So it's not sensitive to red light. Photographic paper isn't sensitive to red light, but it is sensitive to white light, which would come from an enlarger, and it would be quite focused. So when you take the photographic paper out into daylight or ambient light, you'll start to see these pink pinky purple colours, or if it's colour paper, you'll get a fabulous range of colours. Which is basically because the photographic paper isn't designed to be used that way. So it starts reacting strangely. And if you, what developer does is it kind of enhances the paper's receptivity to light. So you can still get an image from using, say, sunlight or a strong amount of light, because basically developer is enhancing that capability of the paper, of the light sensitive paper, by quite a lot, and that's why it works so fast. So I can't really give like a very exact answer to that, but just make sure if you're making lumen prints that you expose it really well, and ideally use daylight or really strong sunlight if you can. Similar kind of idea to cyanotypes. Dino says, do you have any ideas for natural emulsion that could be used in camera, specifically pinhole cameras, so quite sensitive? So an emulsion that isn't using silver, you mean? Pedro says, so lumen prints wouldn't work with UV LEDs, or would they? No, they would work. I've tried using my UV LED light box, and it's worked quite well. And also, like that, the room that I'm in at the moment is strong enough. The light is strong enough to affect the photographic paper. So it definitely would work. It would just be quite a long exposure. In a similar way to, say, cyanotypes, you just want to make sure that the paper is getting a really strong dosage of light. Dino, going back to your question, I'm a director of the London Alternative Photography Collective, and we have a YouTube channel which has a talk about walnut emulsion, and quite some of the artists on the sustainable darkroom residency that I mentioned before were experimenting with that walnut emulsion. So that is a non-silver based emulsion. Whether it would work in a pinhole camera, I think it would be a very long exposure. So that's the kind of partial answer to your question. Ah, great. Well, if you look for the Steve McLeod talk on the London Alternative Photography Collective YouTube, you'll see the talk specifically about walnuts and making an emulsion. If you can't see what Dean has said, he said he has a walnut tree in his garden. So that's perfect. Would anybody like to show any of their work? I'm really keen to see what everybody's making.
I have this, but I'm not sure what is going on.
Oh, let me spotlight you. Stop spotlighting me. Oh, I see. So what are you using?
Like these leaves with the developer.
Ah, like a paintbrush.
Yes. And then I have this.
Oh, cool.
But I don't know why it is all like yellow. It's so yellow. I don't know.
Are you using the caffenol as well?
Yes, but maybe too much caffenol, right?
Could you talk us through your process? So did you dip the paper into the tray of
I put the leaf here with the with this one, with the tape, and then I put it in the developer and fixer. Sometimes, not very much, to be honest. And And also this is very slow. This paper is taking the light very slowly.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It is gray, so I don't know how many times it will, like, in how long it will work.
It's really beautiful. And then were the leaves, were they dipped in the developer?
Sorry?
Were the leaves dipped in the developer?
Yes, I put the leaves in the developer and then I stick them.
Cool. So there's a process called the Phytogram process. And that is where an artist called Karel Doing noticed that if you put plants into just the vitamin C and the soda crystals, the chemicals, the phenols within the plant itself would turn into a developer. So I think that might have happened on your piece of paper, like the amazing plant content within your plants has also made a developer on top of the caffenol. Really cool.
Thanks. And that's it.
Thank you. Thanks for showing us. Okay, guys, so we're going to have a bit of time now for last questions and last showing of results. But we can also share results online. So if anybody wants me to send, me their results, I can ask Air Gallery if we can do some kind of post about those on their Instagram. Because it's really good to see everyone's different approaches to a similar technique. And also, if you forget to, if you have questions that occur to you later, feel free to email me. So I'm just answering a few of these questions. Steph says, who is the artist you mentioned working with the leaves? So that's Karel Doing, and I'll write that in the chat so you get the correct spelling. And it's Photography. And Joe says, will you be presenting any more workshops? Yes, I have quite a few coming up with Land Art Collective. So I'll just type that in the chat box. There's about 6 workshops coming up. Rona says, I did something with 2 kinds of dip string and they created different intensities of darkness, perhaps like the leaves. Yeah, maybe they have some plant content within the string. Bonnie says, will this recording be available? Yes, I'm going to send it edited a little bit just to get rid of some of the more empty parts, but with all of the demonstration and the talk. Anna says, everyone's work has been really interesting. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, it's been great to see everybody's work. Okay, I think we'll end it there. But if anybody in the next minute wants to show their work, we can show that. Okay, thank you everyone. It's been really great. Yeah, please ask any questions if you think of them, and please send me your results by email. Bye guys, thank you so much. Have a great weekend.